All right, and welcome to the relaunch of the Richards Guitar Studio podcast. I'm Colin Ainsworth, guitar instructor and band director here at the studio. So to get the podcast back underway, we have our owner and founder here, Nate Richards, and we're going to get into the background of the studio, how it came to be, what some of Nate's influences were in his own lessons, and then when he started teaching privately. And we'll dig into some other music-related topics at hand. So welcome here to Nate.
Thanks, Colin.
All right, let's get underway with, since we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary next year, let's just take a look at the early years of the studio and how it got underway here in Aston.
All right, will do. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I guess if we open up, since coming up on the 10-year anniversary, just kind of like the basic background of how everything got started, and then if we could tie that back into, that's what I was thinking, like your experiences learning guitar and what might have influenced wanting to set the studio up this way, you know, if there were positive models for it or some of the reaction to improve some of the horror stories that you'd, I guess without naming names and throwing anybody under the bus, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about how it got started. Basically, our opening day was March 1st, 2009, and it snowed, so we had to close the first day. So we really started March 2nd, 2009. We made the LLC for the business, I think it was New Year's Eve of 2008. So it was just a couple months before. But I had the idea because I was working at George's Music in Springfield, just like, for those who don't know what that is, it's just a local music store with guitar lessons. I was teaching there since 2001. And then I stopped working there around 2006 or 2007, and I was just kind of like freelancing, doing my own thing, like running a studio here and there and teaching, and basically just trying to get my own following of students. And so I had like 2 or 3 different places I would go and rent places by the day, kind of. And then I got married and basically wanted a way to, leverage the lessons and stuff that I had come up with, and then also try to figure out a way to make my pay a little bit more steady, based on the number of students that I had, because the way that the policies worked at these other places really were not conducive to making a living teaching music. So, like I said, mostly it was sales, guitar sales. So they didn't really care about the lesson program as long as you kept bringing the students back. So they have birthdays and they buy guitars and stuff like that. Yeah. So basically I wanted to do it my own way, and I couldn't at these other places. So, we were looking all around Delaware County area, and it was just actually just an accident that we came across this place. There was a sign out in front of this place for commercial place for lease. So we called the number, and we showed up here, and he calls us, and he's like, "Where are you guys?" And we're at where the sign was, and he's like, "Oh, this was a different unit. It's down the street, but you know what? I think there's one in there that's going to be open soon." So he brought us up here, and we have this long open waiting room, and then next to that, 4 offices next to it. And we walk in, and it's all cubicles. So there's these 4 big offices and then a smaller 5th office at the end. And then all on the right-hand side, all the way down, about 50 feet, was cubicles. And it turned out it was a mortgage company. And the crash had just happened, and literally they got up and walked out, and the business, that was it. So we come in, there's copy machines, there's papers, there's cubicles. It was really weird. So he's like, yeah, they're pretty much out of business. So in 2 months, it'll be open. So we were like, dude, this is a perfect setup. Let's just do it. And that's how we started here. So
how many students did you bring over when the studio first got underway?
I probably had, I only had probably 30 or 35 at that point, because I had 60 or 65, and then I got a full-time day job teaching music. So I kind of scaled back, but we had me with my 30 or 35 students, and then we had 3 other guys that were teaching, and it was, I mean, we had all this square footage, like 1,200 square feet, and we were only utilizing maybe 20% of it, and it was pretty tight in the beginning. And again, it was right around the crash, so like people didn't have a whole lot of money to throw around at music lessons, but they still did if they felt it was important for them or for their kids mostly. They still did. But yeah, we didn't have a whole lot. I think the total was probably 60 students, maybe 50, like day one. And then from there, obviously it increased over time.
What was that early lineup of teachers? Was that guys you brought over from Westchester University and other, what was kind of the connections there?
Yeah, it was 2 guys from Westchester. That's where I got my undergrad and my graduate degrees. 2 guys from Westchester that I hooked up with Glenn Lyons, the previous professor there. And one guy who, Eric Maitland, who's been a long time teacher here, I asked him, if he wanted to teach. And at first he was hesitant because he was still working at George's Music. So he didn't join us until a couple months later. But so Eric, I asked him, and he was like interested, but maybe not. So he recommended a friend who turned out to not be a good recommendation, unfortunately. But the 2 guys from Westchester really worked out, and they were here for years. So, and basically, I didn't even have the space yet. It was really shady. Borders Bookstore was still open.
Okay.
And had that like little cafe. Mm-hmm. So I showed up, and I had one interview after the next, 30 minutes apart in the cafe. And it was, I don't know, I felt really weird and shady about it. We were just signing contracts and stuff. And I didn't care about the people around me, but it was really the teacher. So why are we meeting here? Where am I teaching? I haven't even seen the place. I'm like, well, I don't actually have the keys yet, so.
Especially with the cafe at Borders, where all high school students are going to read books and not have to actually buy them. So
yeah, right. Those were the days, man.
Let's get a job interview going while we got these high school kids reading Rachel Carson's Silent Spring for environmental science without having to buy it. Really pro atmosphere,
Yeah. But they were all here 1 day a week, and the setup. I took some advice from an old friend of mine who I used to rent his space, and he was a really nice guy, and he had a lot of cool guitar methods that we shared. I shared stuff with him, he shared some stuff with me. That's how I found out about the Troy Statina method, which we use and we could talk about. Actually, we did a previous podcast a couple of years ago when we were going to start this whole podcast thing with Pete Napper, and we talked about the Troy Statina method. But anyway, he gave me this advice about how to set up the financials with the teachers, and it turned out that maybe that wasn't the best way to go for growth. For the beginning, when cash is tight and everything, it was a really cheap way to do it, and it just wasn't as legit and it needed as it could have been and needed to be in order so growth really was stagnant for a couple of years. I think we could have gotten to where we are a little bit faster if we would have set it up, the financials a different way, the cash flow a different way in the beginning. But I mean, what are you going to do? I didn't know anything about business. I was reading books and constantly reading books, talking with my accountant, with my lawyer about stuff, trying to figure this whole thing out about how to run a business with 1099 independent contractors. And we figured out a way to do it without the 1099 for, I think it was 4 years, the first 4 years. And then it might have been 5. And then we started to transition the financials another way where we could actually have some cash flow. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but, once we started to have the cash flow and we could say, okay, we want to start a rock band program. We want to start, and that's when everything started to blow up. When we started that, so
yeah, and it was although I did always get more cred with my dad's side of the family, are all accountants. So in me as the nerdy humanities and arts guy, I was having to do all my own Schedule C and everything completely with no 1099 supporting it.
Yeah.
I almost felt like a real bookkeeper every tax season.
Yeah. When you came in, we were still doing it that way, and it worked for a little while, but I think it was an attractive offer for somebody because it was like a flat rate tenant fee for the teacher, but it really put a ceiling on how much the teacher could actually do. So now you run bands, you're doing this media department, you're working shows. I mean, all those other opportunities to make a little bit of, money on the side of teaching private lessons literally would not have been there. So, it's a give and take, but I think everybody's making more now, than they could have been if we would have stuck with the kind of like the hairdressers, they do like they rent the chair.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? And then their people pay them and tip them or something.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly how it works, but I've heard that that's one way of them doing that, and it's sort of how we had it set up.
So what were some of the other influences with getting things together? I mean, 'cause you studied coming up, learning as a guitarist and musician. I mean, you had a lot of different private teachers, right?
Yeah. So basically, when I started, it was 1990. I've always liked the sound of the guitar ever since I was a kid, and my dad was a musician, a classical musician, so he always looked down on the guitar a little bit, but I think now he understands where I'm coming from. But he was like, okay, this is what he's into, so he bought me a guitar, and classical guitar. So I got classical guitar lessons. I was in elementary school. This guy Brent at George's Music, actually, that's where I started. I kind of came full circle when I started working there, but and he was an incredible guitar teacher. Taught me how to read music and everything right from the beginning. But it was a different time back then when people expected their improvement to be slow. They didn't expect to come in and play something in 15 minutes like kids nowadays do, because everything's so fast. But so anyway, and I really wanted an electric guitar, and Metallica came out with Enter Sandman, and that was like, they were able to get into the mainstream with that stuff, whereas before they were sort of hidden. And some of my friends would be like, oh yeah, I got these cassette tapes of Metallica and Megadeth and Iron Maiden and all this stuff, and every time I would get one into the house, my parents would take it away and hide it, because the satanic lyrics, quote satanic lyrics, so really weren't.
Loud head banging. Yeah, Iron Maiden sing about Alexander the Great and the rhyme of the ancient mariner and all that.
Yeah,
all evil history and literature.
And then like Master of Puppets, I think, is about cocaine, isn't it?
Yeah, with the good cautionary drug tale. Don't do drugs, kids. You can't be listening to that as a young impressionable youth.
So basically, I wanted to play rock guitar. So finally, I got them to get me an electric guitar, and then I had lessons with Gary Grisafi, who was a really good teacher locally. And then I stopped for a little bit, and then I went back and had lessons with Barry Benedetta. And I got into all the shred guitar stuff, and I was in bands from 7th grade until 12th grade. And at that point, so I was taking all the lessons. I was in a lot of bands. We would play parties and cause a lot of mischief and stuff like that throughout middle school and high school. And then finally, I wanted to go to college for music, so it was all classical music. So I ended up kind of putting the electric guitar aside for a little while, and went to college with a focus on classical guitar as the performance aspect of it. But I got my music education degree and a dual degree in music theory and composition. So and then basically I just played classical music for a while. Went back several years later and got my master's, which was all classical music. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the metal stuff now with a new band I'm starting, and finally get back to that. But those were some of my teachers. Tony Diodano was one of my teachers for classical, and Glenn Lyons at Westchester University. So I hope I'm not missing anybody. Well, one of the most influential teachers for me was Chris Adam. He was a music theory teacher at Ridley High School. And I wasn't doing well in school, and that was the class that made me want to go to school. and that was the class that he was the one that hooked me up with Tony to learn classical to prepare for entrance exams and auditions, and the rest is history. But without him being there and being the kind of guy who was really passionate about music theory, and then he was also willing to take a long-haired kid with earrings and wallet chain and boots and, you know, Slayer t-shirts, and here he is, the band director, and take an interest in somebody like me, where, you know, not every band director would do that, you know. So, you know, he saw that I had some talent with guitar and music theory, and you know, he just encouraged me, and that was really the way that I was able to get into college. So,
what was like, so taking lessons at studios, or were some of those sort of house call type things with some guys? Like, did you see that range of different approaches to teaching the guitar, and like how you set up the physical plant as kind of, I guess, because that's what people sometimes forget with a lot of music studios, that, yeah, when you're taking lessons in a broom closet, it's not always super conductive to wanting to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that being uncomfortable, you know, because it was a 3.5 by 5 3/4 or 6 feet or something like that. I mean, it was incredibly small. You couldn't fit two adult males in there without the guitar sticking out the door halfway. So you couldn't even close the door. Here at Richard's Guitar Studio, we have 10 by 10 offices, which is the bomb because it's so comfortable. When there's not a lot of crap everywhere, but, you know, we have a lot of equipment. But
yeah, we have enough of the space for bookshelves so I could put the Joplin complete rags and Bach inventions and other things in there to
definitely
portray myself as more than just some long-haired rock and roller.
That's one thing I am proud of at this place, is that literally everything, every piece of anything around, we use everything, with the exception of some drums that were donated to us that are in the back. That the only reason we don't use them is because the hardware is like 1980 size hardware. I guess it's like it's a smaller mount for the toms, and like I've been trying to find those mounts, and I just can't, you know, whatever the hardware changes were. Anyway, besides that,
if any listeners out there have any,
right, yeah, exactly, yeah, 1984 Ludwig rocker, I'm pretty sure that's the year. So, you know, send me your mounts if you have them.
Are there any other cliche musician requests? I need a ride home from here. If anybody,
that's funny. Yeah, basically, everything in here we use, you know. But yeah, I did see a lot of the approaches. I mean, you know, obviously there was the music store approach, and then Barry ended up leaving there and was teaching at his house, so I went to his house, and then same thing with Tony. I had lessons with him at a store, and then I eventually started taking lessons with him at his house just because of scheduling. But I didn't. There wasn't such thing as a rock school, you know, when I was learning. The first time I heard about that, I guess, was in the 2000s, early 2000s. But unless I was missing something, or just it wasn't in our area yet. Mm-hmm. You know, I guess the Paul Green stuff, was that in Philly originally?
I'm trying to think who, because I know there's some around the area, I think in Philadelphia, and some of the ones out on the main line but I think those were always like summer, like Christmas break type thing. Like that's what I always kind of remember. I never remember anybody who was operating a year-round, you know, rock school.
Yeah, I mean that if that model were around, I probably would have been all over it when I was a kid. But the thing that I do like about looking back is that we went through hell and high water to play. We built when I was in 8th grade. I hung out with older kids because my band they were kids in 9th and 10th grade, and then they had siblings in 11th and 12th grade. So it was like a lot of these older kids. But we actually found this like stockpile of discarded wood. I don't know if the person was planning on using it or whatever, but we got all this stuff, and then we purchased a few things, and we built a stage in my backyard on my basketball court. It was amazing. It was 6 sections of, I guess it was 6x9 plywood. 4 of the sections were 2 feet high. 2 of the sections were 3 feet high for the drum riser. I got to dig up old pictures of this, dude. It took like a month, and then at the end of 8th grade, we invited like 100 people to my backyard and had this huge concert in the back. And so then the year after, we did the same thing at somebody else's house because they wanted that, you know, experience again. But basically, we built a freaking stage, dude. Like, that's how badly we wanted to play. And sometimes these kids that come in, and I totally appreciate the fact that this is the timing of their this is nothing against them or whatever, but they literally just walk into a show, and like we have me, you, and Eric, and Joe, you know, working these shows. They walk in, all the stuff's set up, all the venue negotiations are done, everything's done. They just walk in and play. So, you know, I mean, maybe we should put them to manual labor at some point. Like, you know, you guys, if you want to play, you got to build a freaking stage right here.
That was part of the, yeah, we can't use the term hazing. That's not, the learning experience, the hands-on experiential learning. You have to prove yourself that.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I do think we should have them come and help haul the equipment sometimes. I think sometimes we spoil them a little bit too much, but there is the fact that they're paying, you know, so, but I feel like that experience would be a valuable education experience that I think we should consider. Some of the kids, they do bring their drums if we ask them, or their amps. Like if we have, you know, a show where it's either a private thing, you know, or a graduation party or something like that, private party. Sometimes the older kids will bring their stuff, you know, which is helpful for us. But I feel like we should work it into the school somehow, you know, and be like, okay, if you want to be in a band, this is really what it's like. You know, your back's going to hurt a little bit, you know. Where you learn the fine art of trial and error I was playing some of the kids I found, I think up on Reverb Nation, my high school band's like demo albums still up there. Oh my goodness.
So that's, I was saying, like, yeah, I was only 4 years older than you guys are now. You have no excuses. I just like what today would be considered primitive equipment, and me and one of the other guys, like, none of us really knew about proper audio production. So we're just there like messing with the EQs until everything sounds good, until, you know. Dude,
we went to this, the first time I recorded, I was in 8th grade. I think it was the summer before 8th grade, and McDade Boulevard in Ridley. If you remember where the first Wawa was, the original Wawa,
yeah,
like the first one ever, it was on McDade Boulevard in Folsom. Across the street, there was this recording studio. It's obviously not there anymore. It was a little place. We went there, and this is how old school this was. I guess this was 1994 or 1990. Yeah, I think it was 94. We got like 200 cassette tapes made, and it sounded awful, but like we were so proud of it, and we distributed that to all of our friends because it was still, people were still playing cassettes. I mean, CDs had come out. I mean, they'd come out like 4 or 5 years before that anyway. But like, if you went into a music store, it was still the wall all the way around was cassette tapes, and then the CDs were in the trays, you know, the tables all the way across the middle, and that's how it was still set up. So that's why we made cassettes, because everybody was still listening to them.
Yeah, that was some guys I've subbed in with. They had done their one album of originals back in the late 90s. I guess they were all out of school and had like started working and knew one another from, these were all like petrochemical salesmen and engineers, like pretty high level intelligence guys, but somehow I think they didn't check in the fine print. The minimum CD pressing was like 1,000 units or whatever. So they're just like, yeah, we're just going to like sell these at concerts and our family and stuff. Oh, wait a sec. Okay, now it's a minimum.
Right, yeah.
So they still have like boxes of their.
Yeah, I mean, you know, every studio, you just got to watch it. Like this, we had the same thing in high school when I was in 10th grade. Again, it was a summer between 10th and 11th. We went to Top 10 Music.
Glen Olden.
which is a classic, legend of a store around this area. So we went there, and they had this recording studio in the basement. It actually sounded really good. I'm thinking about posting this stuff. I just got to double check with the singer because a couple of the parts are a little, but it was all original. Same thing with the first band, all original stuff. So if I think I can find that first one. My brother made me a recording of it. I think somehow it actually accidentally got sped up. Like it was probably the most amazing Christmas gift. He found an old cassette of my band. It was called Deadline. And we were like a New York hardcore, Biohazard,
with that Madball, all those kinds of
and Sick of It All, stuff like that. But we had solos, so it was like that with solos, and because I would not agree to never solo. Every song I had to have a freaking guitar solo, which is how it should be.
Just saying.
Yeah, right. So no, we so he found it in my basement, my parents' basement, and then it was all dusty and dirty, and he had a friend like clean it up and make a CD, but I think it actually sped it up a little bit when some of the parts he couldn't get clean, but I have it somewhere, and I'll see if I can post some of that. That would be great. I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird that all these hardcore songs are all in F minor instead of E minor. That's kind of a.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it did something like that. Like the pitch went up, or it sped it up a little bit. But and then some of the parts, I was using this PV amplifier, and I would not budge on scooping the mids. So I had no mids, all bass, all treble, and obviously the gain all the way up. So there were a couple parts where all you could hear is where you could not hear anything from the riff. And I just, because, when you're practicing scooping the mids, it sounds great, but when you record it, you need those mids in there unless you have a professional doing it, you know what I mean, to get that injustice for all sound. That's what I wanted. But it was like, it was so bad. It was just so bad. Anyway, but those were the days, dude. And the thing that just reminded me of, like, me and my friends, and I was talking to my oldest son about this recently, about the whole cassette and CD thing, where our parents would drop us off at the mall, and we would go to the music store, which back then was the Wall, in like the Springfield Mall or something, or in the McDade Mall even.
R.I.P. Yeah. Well, I guess it's still there, but not the vibrant.
Yeah.
Teenagers going to a music store scene that it may have once been.
And dude, it was so great. Like, you could go in there and look at all these album covers and song names and different bands, and maybe you've heard of a band, and you go in there, and it's not just like clicking around on the internet, obviously, like the way it is now, but like you actually could hold it in your hand. And like, let's say I remember distinctively, I knew who Ozzy Osbourne was, but I didn't know anything about all of his discography. So I went in there, and I'm looking around, and you got Blizzard of Oz, you got Diary of a Madman, you have No More Tears, which is new. So that would have been what, 90?
Was that 1991 roughly?
Yeah, something like that. Because when that song came out, I was like, that is awesome. And so, I was obviously going to get No More Tears, but then I'm looking at the other ones. I'm looking at the song names, and I'm recognizing some of it, and then others I'm not. And then, so anyway, I mean, you find the new music like this, and then maybe there's a band in there. Like, I saw this other cassette tape, Sabotage, and I was like, that kind of looks like a cool name. The cover's really cool. I'm gonna get this.
I don't know what a gutter ballet is, but I'm interested. I don't know.
And basically, I hated the whole thing, but I listened to the whole thing, and at the very end, there's this song that's and I'm like, that's freaking awesome. It's like a Christmas rock song. And like, nobody knew who this was. And then, within a couple years, all of a sudden it's all over the radio. And I'm like, I know that. That's Sabotage. They're like, no, it's Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I'm like, no, it's Sabotage. I have the cassette tape. I'm telling you. But anyway, the point is that you get these cassette tapes, and even if you don't like it, you still listen to the whole thing because you want to find that gem in there. and you can. There are gems to find, and then maybe your opinion or your taste will change because you're listening to, because you have one tape that has 8 songs, 4 on one side, 4 on the other side, generally, and you listen to the thing. Nowadays it's so easy to listen to 10 or 11 seconds of a song, and then if you don't like it, switch to something else and you don't give it a chance. So some of the music that I didn't initially think I was going to like, over time I actually grew to like those songs, and prefer those songs, because I kind of had to listen to them is all I had,
Yeah, because that's the one thing I've been making the conscientious effort lately, to actually listen to whole albums again.
Yeah.
Not let my attention span just completely go to hell. Because that was, because you were saying, because I remember, I think it was in 3rd grade or 4th grade. I think I got my first Sabbath records in 3rd grade. And then it might have been 4th grade. I taped the, when you're like 10 years old and have to figure out how to do this, because my uncle brought the LPs over. So I had to like set them up on like my dad's stereo system on the turntable, and then actually copy the blank cassettes and everything. But I think he had, it was Blizzard of Oz, then Bark at the Moon.
Nice.
So it's like I got like Randy Rhoads and Jake E. Lee at one time with the.
Awesome.
But I think he had the early pressings. It was still just Jet Records or whatever the imprint was that Sharon Osbourne's father ran or whatever. But it was like an early pressing of the album, I think. And I just remember like seeing that spinning in the beginning of I Don't Know with the gong and the whole
that's awesome.
I'm like, yo, this is And then but I guess like where Jake E. Lee doesn't always get credit as much, but that's probably one of the things, is like when I was 10, like I'm like, well, I have the whole Bark at the Moon album, I should listen to it, all of it,
Like, well, he like that. See that Jake E. Lee, whatever happened there, I just don't think they were able to work together. That guy was amazing. When I got that album, I was just so happy just to listen over and over. But the other cool thing that just popped in my mind about it was like, you're talking about getting these albums, whether it's a record or a cassette tape or even a CD, is like there's also that anticipation, because it's like, all right, this is Ozzy and this one has Jake E. Lee, or you might open it up and you're like, who the hell is this Jake E. Lee guy? You know what I mean? You didn't even know until you looked in the jacket.
Yeah.
But you have this anticipation, and it's like this legend, and then you're like building it up in your mind, and then when you put the tape in and close it, it's like this ritual. You know what I mean? And then you have the jacket open in front of you. You can see the words. You can see all the names of the players in the band. They have pictures, and I don't know. It's just like this ritual thing that it makes the music so special and memorable. And I think that especially kids nowadays should do that, even though it costs money and you can't really go. I mean, I guess you're going to have to order it or whatever now on Amazon. But, I mean, if you can find a music store that actually sells the physical music, there's no better way. There's no better way to get into music than that.
Yeah, and there was still, I think I still have the whole pack of, like the whole like stack of CDs that I got to get to from the last time I was down at, what's the one after everybody consolidated, like the Wall and all their sister stores, what is it now, like FYE or whatever?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because there's still one, it's down at the Concord Mall. So then they always have like a ton of used stuff in there now.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So, and plus I keep paying for the rewards membership, so I really need to like, I think hit my $250 a year to at least justify the, the 10% off or whatever. But yeah, but it's like, I'll just like go into like the jazz section and just buy like stacks of like all this used stuff in there, all these different compilation albums and different things. And yeah, you still like find so much that way.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, getting into classical music and jazz music, which, again, back then there wasn't anything readily available as far as like, you could just look somebody up and have all of their recordings on YouTube where you could just listen. What I used to do for mostly classical music, jazz, I listened to a little bit more later, but jazz or classical is where what I used to do is basically the summer between 11th and 12th grade, after I got out of my last band there in high school, there was a lot of stuff going on, and I basically disassociated myself with all my friends because it was going to a dangerous place with drugs and alcohol and stuff. And it was past the point of fun experimentation. It was like, this is actually getting really serious. So I have to choose now. You know, I was taking those music theory classes and guitar lessons, and I was like, you know what, I want to go to college for music. This is the point. You know, this is the line in the sand has been drawn. Do I continue and go over that line, or do I, you know, stop or take a right-hand turn or whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor. But so I just stopped talking to everybody, and I would just stay in my house and practice Dream Theater until I could play images and words note for note with the whole recording. Like, I would just come home every day and play images and words, crank it up on my stereo. So what I started doing was walking to the Ridley Township Library. They would let you take 5 CDs at a time. So what I would do is go in there, find 1 or 2, maybe 3 classical composers that I knew their names, and rent them, and then one or 2 that I didn't know. So every day or every couple days, I would come home with 5 classical discs, and then I would, what you're talking about before, I would put them on the CD player and start copying them onto cassettes. So up in my parents have this loft, and I still have these stacks of cassettes. I copied at least half of their CDs.
By the way, home taping is killing music. You shouldn't home tape. It's killing the industry.
Right, exactly. Well, hey, I mean, it was rented, you know, but yeah, that really doesn't count. That was total violation of copyright there. But anyway, so I would walk around with my Sony Walkman and listen to all this stuff. And again, you got to give it a chance. Sometimes you don't like the beginning of it, and you're like, I don't know what the hell is going on, especially with classical music. You're like, what is going on? I hear some sounds, I hear harmonies, but I don't really know what's happening right now. And then the more you listen to it, you start to understand, oh, I see what the composer's doing. So I think all that time without my friends actually was great for my musical development, because I was forced to, to listen to this music. And that's how I got into a lot of different classical music, was that was a good 3 or 4 month period of me doing that. I got into a lot of composers, Brahms, symphonies, I remember. And then my dad had a lot of classical music CDs. Obviously, I wouldn't have to copy those because they were there, but I would listen to a lot of his Mahler CDs. I had the cassette Walkman and the CD Walkman. And I would have in my school bag CDs and cassettes and my 2 Walkmen, depending on what I wanted to listen to. And I would just walk around Ridley and smoke. You know, it was a good way for me to get out of my house so I could, sneak smoking. Walk down the tracks. Don't walk on the train tracks, guys.
Okay.
But
Speaking of other federal offenses. Yeah.
Yeah. Walk the tracks from my house over to the township area where the library was. Cut through the woods, and, There were great times, too, just walking around through the Harper's Woods. No longer there. There's a Home Depot there now. But, yeah, man, I would just walk all around, chain smoke, and listen to classical music for like 3 or 4 months. And and then I would go home and play Dream Theater, and that was my life.
And not at all a stereotypical art music thing to get a pack of Gaulois from France and some black coffee and
right, yeah,
listen to some Brahms out in amongst nature and everything, with not like those long-haired Dream Theater singing about Hamlet and whatever else that pull me under, that evil satanic heavy metal music,
right, yeah,
singing about Shakespeare.
Well, at that point my parents had, once I got into middle school, I think they were like, this is not a phase, this is not going to stop. This is what he wants to do. So, I'm not going to say they embraced it, but they gave me the space to do it. And my mom would drive me to lessons every week, So, if your parents are doing this for you, young kids, thank them and definitely appreciate what they're doing, because they're driving you. They're taking the time to fight traffic to get you to the studio for the lessons. They're paying for the lessons. and it's a week in, week out, constant. And so it was an investment that my parents made in me, that basically guitar got me everything in my life. So, after I went on that hiatus from all my friends, like mid-year and senior year, I met who would become my wife. So the guitar, I guess she liked guitar players, or me because I play guitar, whatever it was. And then guitar got me into college, and then guitar got me my music job after that at a school. And then during college and after college, the guitar got me income from teaching. And these are all like, tangible outside externals. But the whole time since I was a kid, and even till today, the guitar got me the most important thing, which is pure joy of playing music. Like today I was working on some Megadeth stuff for my new cover band that I'm doing, and it was just pure joy playing the guitar. And it still is. It's like I started in 91, so we're talking almost 30 years. How is it that doing the same thing every day for 30 years still gives you joy? It's amazing. It really is when you think about it.
Well, and that's one of the things too, just bring it back to the studio and like the environment that's been fostered and all, because that's what I say, it's like the last normal suburban music school left. And not to, go after everybody, the competition, but it's like in major metropolitan areas, like around here, you have a lot of the like jokers just charging people to come to amateur hour for 30 minutes or and then you have so many of like the snootier schools that are trying to be a little bit above their station in life. And I gotta remember them, like, you're not like Curtis Institute, you're
right,
just like a music studio in a suburban neighborhood. That's what, when people would ask me, oh yeah, well, can't you like pick up more hours at some other studios elsewhere? I'm like, there's no other normal suburban music schools that I want to be at anymore. Like I found the only one that, like the last one left.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate that. And that's definitely like, that's something that I think just comes with how the mindset is. It's basically like, okay, everybody should be passionate and inspired on what they're doing. But a lot of studios stop there. And they're like, if everybody's passionate and having a good time, then it's good. But the problem there is that there's no standards, and there's no, go elbows deep in it and be like, okay, we're passionate and we're inspired to do this and we want to have fun. And it's not just all about, it is about fun, but, because I was just talking about the pure joy of it. But where the joy comes from is the excellence part. So like, this morning, I would have not experienced the same amount of joy if I was half-assing a Megadeth solo, where it was like, it kind of sounds like, yeah, cool. Put my guitar down and go, watch Netflix or something. The joy came from nailing the solo perfectly, Or it doesn't have to just be that. It could be improv, where you're making your own music or you're writing your own music. Whatever it is, whether you're trying to learn somebody else's music or make your own music, the higher the excellence factor, or the higher return on what you're doing. So, you want to have fun with it, and we try to stay motivated. And the thing is that when you get to a point beyond where you ever thought you could get, that's when you really feel it. You're like, oh my goodness, like that was amazing. I never thought I could play like that, or I never thought my band, at Richard's Rock Academy could sound like that, or, this is just beyond my expectation. And that's where, the excellence. So what you're talking about, like the snooty, snobby, high, like there is part of that where we want to take those standards of excellence and hit those, but you don't want to, lose sight and be judgmental on different kinds of music. So if somebody wants to learn a Taylor Swift song, she's not the pinnacle of guitar playing, but when we learn that song, we're going to learn it with excellence. It's, recorded well, so we're going to play it well. And when we finally play it well and are jamming and having fun with it, it's going to be a great experience. So that's the thing. You don't want to half-ass things. You want to make sure that you're, and that's what we try to do here, is like, go beyond the excellence. Ring the excellence bell. You know, the wow factor.
But that was it's when I get off on my high horse with people that, because it's almost like back in like the territorial days of pro wrestling and like the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, like where they said like protect the business, you know, like keep kayfabe, keep the whole illusion that everything's real, don't ever talk to outsiders, like protect the, and that was always, like protect the business and respect the business. And that's like I always, because like, because my teachers were in their 80s and 90s when I was with them. And like, because my teacher I don't think he had a day off for like 35 years. Like he taught 6 days a week in the afternoon and then played 6 nights a week, but they didn't, you know what I mean?
Right,
so he was working 7 days a week.
Every day,
And, but that was like, but I mean, like, you know, regardless of how you feel about organized labor or whatever, but, you know, I mean, that was when like everything was still American Federation musicians, like, music was still, you know, like being a tailor or any other field where like art and commerce intersect, like it's still like, you know, it was still like a respectable like trade vocation kind of. And I mean, I think he went to, because he was up in Massbom up in North Philly, which is like a vocational school, and they had like basically like a college level music program for high school, like what Votech schools are going to have.
Yeah. It's like, or like AP or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's the best you're going to get is like the AP music. You know, I'm not saying that's not good, but there's no like Votech like public school music programs that I'm aware of anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and but that's where I always maybe that's that designation instead of just last like normal suburban music school, because that was just expected of guys back then playing the clubs. Like, you got to be able to play swing, be able to play classical, be able to throw a country western tune in if need be. Like, there's nothing above or below. You do it all, and you do it all with the intention that this is how you could legitimately make a living, you know. It's like the highbrow, lowbrow together, you know.
Well, high and lowbrow together. I guess that's a good way to put it, because basically that's what we're trying to accomplish, where basically what I try to do with the guitar methods particularly is infuse the rock and modern, all that stuff, infuse those lessons with my classical background. So for example, like being able to read and count rhythm is huge. And then how does that affect your picking? Once you can strategize that and understand how that works, it takes at least 50% of the problems out of learning a song. So already you're going into to learning a song with better tools. Then there's the music theory and music reading part. The more you can understand about how all that stuff works and how the fretboard works, it takes so many of the roadblocks away. So that's the highbrow stuff, is music theory and musicianship and stuff like that. And as long as that's infused into the methodologies, so that, you know, not only is it that the students are learning better, but the learning process is much smoother. Or I shouldn't say smoother. I mean, any song to play is hard, but it takes away unnecessary anxiety and stress. Like, you know, there's no reason to be stressed out about, let's say, Holy Wars, because that's what I was doing this morning. In the beginning of the song, so a lot of times people misinterpret the rhythm as, you know, on the beat 1 EN, 2 EN, 3 EN, 4 EN, because that's the first sound that you hear in the song. Mm-hmm. So you assume naturally we hear the first sound as the downbeat. You know, it's just that's what we expect it to be. But it's actually end of 1, end of 2, end of 3, end of 4. So without knowing that, you can go through the entire intro, which is like 30 seconds. And then when the drums finally come in with a regular beat, there's like this hiccup in the rhythm that happens if you felt it wrong the whole way. So I've had students, and I myself, I remember in high school learning the song before I could really read rhythm well, like trying to figure out, what is this, like a odd time signature, like progressive type thing? Like, why can't I get this? I can never come out on the downbeat right. I don't know what I'm missing. And it could be an hour of frustration on this thing, when really if you could read the rhythm in the tablature and understand how it works, you literally wouldn't have that hour of stress, you know? So that's where the highbrow stuff helps our students, you know, not only play better, but the learning process is more strategic. It's under control. You understand what's going on. There's nothing more stressful and anxiety-filled times of learning a song when you're completely confused, and not even confused. You have no idea what's going on. So you don't have any foothold to learn the song, and that's where it's just not fun at that point. It's really not.
Yeah, especially with all the crazy, rest in peace era, Megadeth. When everybody's, yes, I'm totally going to butcher the, was that Will Rogers, or was it, like saddle your dreams before you ride them, or whatever, or something like that's the, I just did, just played some Maiden and Priest tunes. Now I'm going to go get this crazy thrash metal going, and never mind. Yeah, you know what? Maybe not. It's always that great roadblock to hit if you don't have that skill set going into it.
Yeah, and I mean, there shouldn't be anything, you know, there shouldn't be anything that's ultimately simple. Like reading and counting rhythm and then aligning it to your pick. It's not rocket science. It's just something that people don't feel like thinking about it. They're like, I don't feel like doing it that way. I just want you to show me, or I'll do it by ear. And I'm like, well, you're never going to get past 70% then. It's just not going to happen. I've had students that have an incredible ear. I feel like I have a very good ear because I can figure out all this stuff by ear, but I process it through the lens of music theory. And that includes rhythm, by the way. If you're talking about music theory, it's just all of the elements of music, having a handle and understanding of harmony, melody, rhythm, meter, all those counterpoint, voice leading, all those different things. How all these elements interact with one another really is music theory. But so like when I'm doing a song by ear, I'm still processing it through the lens of theory, and I'm still hearing it that way. But I've had a lot of students that have these incredible ears that are missing things. They're missing things that are like key elements of a song, because, you can't always get it, just by the sound, just by the ear. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but basically.
Yeah, well, that was one of... Because I always remember all my teachers growing up where they'd always, those ear job guys, they can't play, they can't do whatever. And I'd always be thinking like, yeah, but all these guys could figure out all these like crazy chord changes by ear and unbelievable improvisational skills and all these things. And then I was, because they're still, like you said, if you don't have that ability to read and some background, not, at least that basic theory 101 or intro to composition or whatever, like you're always stuck like 70% because you just can't mentally process.
And even those that didn't read, they still knew some theory because they knew the names of the chords and how they were built. So even if somebody didn't read, they'd be like, okay, this is a major seventh chord. They still would have a concept of what that meant. But the other thing that people have to realize is that when you look at people and be like, oh, well, Eddie Van Halen couldn't read music, or, I don't know, name a classical or a jazz guy who, I don't know. I'm not too big on jazz, but I'm sure there's some famous jazz guys that didn't read music. Maybe, was it Wes Montgomery?
That sounds right, since he was a welder, I think.
Well, I mean, the thing is that are you Eddie Van Halen? Are you Wes Montgomery? Do you have an ear like that? I have taught tens of thousands of guitar lessons. I don't know how many students, maybe thousands of students. I've encountered one student in particular that processed music by ear in a way that I was like, you just process it different. I think he had some sort of synesthesia type thing where it was like he would hear colors, he would hear shapes, he would hear textures. He's like, this one feels bubbly and this one's like a triangle and that one's orange. And they just go well together. I'm like, all right, I can't teach you. But I've had students that had perfect pitch even. Like many students with perfect pitch that still needed theory. It doesn't matter if you have perfect pitch. You still need those elements in order to make, as the level of music goes up, you still need that as a lever to help you really pull off some different things.
Yeah, and that was, I don't know if that's what people forget too, that other guys, even when you think about like Hendrix, like when he was young, backing up singers and everything, and some of those like R&B clubs that were probably the ones where like you played from like 8 p.m. to like 8 a.m. So, you know,
Right,
like you were in there for 12 hours. And yeah, if you're doing stuff like that with like a horn section and what's the old, like you hang around the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
Right.
Like, yeah, he's like, you know, a lot of those guys still put hours and hours of work in on the road when they were young and hearing all these horn arrangements and like you don't do that and not learn something about guitar, bass, and drum arranging or.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily an osmosis type thing, but it's something where if you're in that environment, you're gonna pick up things and you're gonna have different strategies. You know, you're gonna learn different strategies that might not just be classical music theory or something like that. So you're gonna make connections between different things because you're living it. But I don't know any kid nowadays that practices more than a couple hours a day. Maybe even more than 10 or 15 minutes sometimes because they're so overscheduled and they're doing 20 different things and not focusing on one or two. So we just don't have people. So unless you have a natural ear like Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix, and unless you're living music where you come in from school and you live it all day and all night and all weekend, then you need theory and musicianship. You know, you can't just look at the greatest ever, you know, or I shouldn't say the greatest ever because Van Halen and Hendrix were not, but, you know, you can't look at some of the greats and say, oh, they didn't read music, so I don't have to. 99.9% of us have to do it. There's a tiny percentage where, like I was saying about that one kid out of teaching music. I started teaching privately in 1999 at my house. Got a job at a store in 2000 or 2001. It was late 2000. And I've been teaching privately ever since. Day in, day out. One kid where I was like, okay, this is not for you because you're. It's not that he was on a higher level. It was just a different level. You know, I'm going down. I'm driving down, you know, 5th Avenue, and he's on 6th Avenue. It's just we're going parallel, but we're on two different roads. But everybody else needs to go 5th Avenue.
Is there any other like student highlights that kind of shaped how things got underway here? Anybody you thought like, wow, things really work with them, we should build something around this?
I think for the curriculum, yes, and that's how I ended up getting all the different methods, and I still have to update some of the stuff in our learning management system, but basically you find what works, and then, you know, so there are some students that actually worked the method, and one of them was Pete Napper. He was probably one of the earlier ones that actually worked the whole method, and his results were incredible. Same thing with Joe Lamara. He's a newer teacher here now, and he was a student of mine. I mean, there's so many examples, but it definitely, like, the way that we teach music is worked into the business, but the whole business side of things is a separate. It has become more separate because I had to learn how to not screw it up, really. So, I mean, you could have the greatest methods in the world, but if you can't pay the rent, then you're done, you know? So, you know, or if you can't pay your renter's insurance or whatever it is that you have to pay. But I feel like the curriculum worked, and I think the results was how we were able to build it. So because they you know, somebody that's seeing results, they're going to be into it. They're going to, you know, obviously keep coming back, and they want to do it, and then they're going to tell their friends, and their friends are going to be like, wow, you're really good. Where do you take lessons? So that was a big part of it.
Yeah, and that was one of those, yeah, I guess like going back with like the like respecting the business thing that so there's like certain periods of time where people like really understood that junction of art and commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And I always forget, if that's like, yeah, I'm like, oh, maybe that's what's missing at like way too many places today.
I think it's an overabundance of one of them. So it would be somebody that's very business savvy and not a musician, or maybe not a musician with high standards. Or it could be the other way around, where it's like the quintessential flaky musician with their head in the clouds and they can't like hold normal conversations, and they come in, like they just rolled out of bed at 4 p.m. or whatever. But like, so you can have them either way. But I think as long as you have somebody making sure the ship is running, and there's still a lot of things we need to improve here. I mean, it's always going to be like that. The more you're in business, you're fixing things that have been broken, and then you're improving new things at the same time. So, whether it's physical, tangible things or things that you let slide, so sometimes that happens and that happens with me as the owner of the place. And, I'll let things slide because I'm working on something else or I'm trying to fix something. So, for example, this last year, we were implementing the new scheduling system with the learning management part built into it with all of our lessons, uploaded when all the teachers could find everything and assign things and all that. And that took a good 6 months to set up. And, as I was doing that, the Rock Academy event planning totally slipped and was people are like, we're not communicating well and everything. And then if I were to go back and focus on the Rock Academy event planning, which we have been, I haven't uploaded anything new for the lessons in a couple months, which I got to get back to. Same thing with the YouTube channel. That's been neglected. So having people step in like how you're stepping in to help with this stuff, it's like, okay, now we can juggle 2 things or 3 things instead of one, and then the other ones drop, and then so that's going to be super helpful. But I think making sure that we can keep all the balls in the air, and not let too many things slide as we improve another area, because not everybody's in the Rock Academy. So a private lesson person might feel neglected over time if they don't see any growth in their area, or they don't see any attention from the owner or whatever. And the Rock Academy people are feeling motivated because all this new stuff is happening, and then the other way happens. Or it could be teachers, might not be new developments in the violin lessons, whereas drum lessons are coming in more, and they're like, drum lessons are happening more. What about violin? So there's a lot of balls to juggle. So that's the key. And I think as we get more of the teachers in helping on this kind of stuff, we're going to be able to do a lot more and make sure that everybody's happy and every area of the business is improving. One of the biggest improvements this year was equipment, like investing the money back into the equipment. I mean, it's so crazy how important that is. Like the piano lessons are going so much smoother now with this new Yamaha we got. The Rock Academy is going way smoother since we put in the second band room. So things like that, being able to reinvest that cash flow so that we can keep the balls in the air. Yeah.
With the it's amazing properly weighted keys on a digital piano. What
Yeah, man.
Yeah, because I used to in high school and I'd be playing on like the basic 61 key beginner Yamaha at home, and then walk into the old, I forget what make it was, if it was just some, like when you just think of like the old like Civics Hall like upright piano in the corner.
Yeah.
With some like crazy local prodigy guy playing while like the Odd Fellows or Elks are meeting and having social. Like that was the piano, and I just walk in and Ow, why do my fingers just break when I'm trying to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with where we are right now. I'm the one thing that I need to do is I need to spend a little bit more focused time on on the curriculum side of things, because we have a great curriculum. I just want to make sure that it continues to grow in our system the way that we do it, and also to grow into drums and bass and piano, because the majority of the stuff we have in there right now is guitar. So I think my goal for next year, 2019, is going to be to become the curriculum director. Like, that'll be my name or my title. You know what I mean? Owner and curriculum director, and pour all that time into making sure that everybody's got as many resources as possible to make. In the end, the purpose is student growth. So, to make sure that we have the systems down to where we can keep the students moving and growing every week, and have the most robust methods, because the methods do matter. Like, if you're trying to teach somebody bending and you're using our way of doing it, it's going to be effective very quickly, but it's long lasting. That's the thing. And then whereas somebody else, they might not know what they're looking at, or they'll see half of it and the kid has a bad habit, and then later on, that it comes back to bite them, But having the teacher being able to see the long-term vision and correct those little tiny things in the beginning is super important. And that's where I want to get into with the violin and with the piano lessons and the drum lessons, to make sure that we're taking those same effective concepts that our guitar players are really, getting great results from, and then just applying it to the other instruments, and then just it'll continue to grow.
Well, I think that's where as the number of instruments taught here has grown, because that was one thing that I always did growing up, because my teacher was originally a classical violinist and then became like a pop guitar player,
Mm-hmm.
So we did all violin etudes all the time, and then trying to get like close voice chords on the guitar from piano method books. And, it was like half the stuff I played out of was probably really for other instruments, And now as we have those resources and, being able to kind of get that think tank idea going.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. And then I guess we should probably wrap it up. It's been at least an hour, right? But one of the reasons why we want to do that is especially for the Rock Academy stuff, and also for other things like, classes that we used to do a little bit more classes. We'll have to do those more, but and then also YouTube lessons that I do, as long as, that might be a student that's not my student from here, utilizing that as a supplementary lesson. That way we're all speaking the same language. You know what I mean? Like, if we have a band together, that the drum teacher is Josh for the drummer, and then there's two guitar players, one of them's your student and one of them's Joe's student, and then we have a singer, and then we have a keyboard player, whatever. That way, as long as we can cross curricular, or whatever you want to call it, there's a word, it's escaping me right now, but if we kind of link everything, and with the guitar players, we've been doing that, where they can work together well because they're coming from the same mindset. We've had it where we had guitar players come from the School of Rock, and it was like, it took them so much longer to, I don't want to say fit in, but to work well with the other people, because they didn't know what we were talking about. Talking about a rest stroke with the pick, talking about left hand muting on power chords, talking about counting the rhythm. Oh, it's on the end of 4. If somebody has never been taught that, they come in, they're like, I don't understand anything you guys are saying right now, and then their playing also is sloppy. And I'm not trying to, School of Rock is an incredible business and everything, but I'm just going to say it because this is the way that this is my experience. Every time we get a guitar player from the School of Rock, their playing is so sloppy. And it's hard to work with, especially if they're playing with another guitar player. Because if you're playing rock music, especially, and you're trying to play the song, and you have one person that's sloppy, it doesn't matter how good the other guy plays. It's not going to sound good, and it doesn't. And especially when you crank the volume, when you crank the gain up, and it's not played clean, it does not sound good. And they're and I know the School Rock, they do have some incredible shows and stuff like that, but the shows that we usually see are their all-star bands. They're like the top kids. We bring all of our bands, and all of our bands are tight. Some more than others, but even the ones that are more beginner bands, you can still clearly hear what they're doing, even if there's 2 guitar players, and sometimes we have 3 guitar players, depending on the age and whatnot. But anyway, there's a lot of times where we'll there was a School of Rock near us that went out of business, so we ended up getting a lot of students from there, coming to us, and it was like, okay, we, the private lesson right now is the most important thing. You need to listen to your teacher on how to clean this up because it's way too sloppy, So we've had to do that a lot, and we pride ourselves in that.
Yeah, because that's how I was hyped up with jumping in with, I think, the sub for one of the bands recently that was doing all the fast 2 guitar harmony lines.
Yeah.
And I said about, be careful of your phrasing. If you have the high part on an unwound string versus the lower register on a wound string, and, just the natural reaction of your pick and applying vibrato to that. And, okay. And I'm like, oh, wow, we could get into some, real esoteric stuff here now about, phrasing on, a wound versus unwound, making sure you get that really clean live harmony, because...
And even stuff like, articulation where there's a staccato note and one person is playing a sharper staccato than the other, it sounds muddy. So we have to agree, do we want a sharp, very, very cut staccato, or is it a staccato 16th note or staccato 8th note? How do we want to do that? And discussing and deciding on the sound that they want, but then they're both able to physically execute it. You know what I mean? Because they're learning their technique well. Sometimes the sound that comes out of guitar is not always on purpose. The person is just doing something naturally that they've always done. And it's amazing sometimes if you have a person playing 3 notes, da da da, and then you tell them for whatever reason in that song it would sound better if you did down up down, and they can't do it. Or it could be the way the rhythm goes on this, we needed to make it up down up, and then it's impossible for them to play it. It's like da da da, down down down, or down down, or up down up. You should be able to do all 3. No problem. You need to have command over your technique. Otherwise, your pick is telling you what to play. You're not telling it. So, and if you have 2 guitar players or 3 guitar players, or you have 2 guitar players and a bass, or you have a keyboard in there, everybody's technique, you need to be able to end up playing, harmoniously. You need to be able to play together, like the Trooper, right? We got those 2 people, the 2 kids playing the Trooper.
Yeah.
And they're both killing it. They're doing a great job. The one thing I want to work on with them is the way the trills work. The first trill is 6 notes. The second trill is 5 notes. So I know this sounds totally OCD, but when you get them together with 6 and 5, so it's basically a triplet 16th note, like 6-tuplet, and then you have a quintuplet. When you get those together in harmony, it sounds amazing. It's like a machine gun of trills. So, these little the little details matter. And when you're playing something like the Trooper, the lead parts, and you have 2 middle school age guitar players that have agreed on triplet 16th notes and quintuplets and a way of doing staccato, and they're playing together, I mean, come on. Is anybody else that focused on this stuff? I mean, I don't see it anywhere.
And another one, getting to sing about the charge of the Light Brigade. Who else is there? You're getting literary and historical, the Crimea War, Alfred Lord Tennyson.
we'll follow up with another one, and then we're gonna get some other people in here, some teachers and some students, and adult students and younger students, variety of instruments. Colin, do you have any other to overview what the podcast is going to be about?
Yeah, and along with that, hopefully getting some roundtable discussions, as we somewhat alluded to earlier. Finally solved the great debate over Randy Rhoads, Jake Ely, or Zach Wilde. And, some other influential albums, maybe top 10 lists, things like that shape teachers and students. Share that information with everybody. Find those new sources of inspiration. And hopefully we could get some outside guests in too, as we're sitting here a few miles up the road from the cradle of rock and roll, Chester, PA, home of Bill Haley and his Comets. And peel the curtain back on some of the great music history around here, and maybe some of the teaching lineages that we kind of have in the studio. So take a look at that Delaware County and Philadelphia music history. Because, if you're studying right up the road from one of the birthplaces of rock music, I mean, what more could you ask for that? Besides getting the harmony lines that tight on the Trooper, otherwise, what more could you ask for than that?
Cool. Awesome. Well, I don't even think we introduced ourselves. I'm Nate Richards, owner and operator of Richards Guitar Studio.
And Colin Ainsworth, guitar instructor and band director.
We'll see you guys next time.